Welcome to What Really Matters podcast, Everyday Spirituality with Karen Wyatt. If you're not familiar with my work, I'm a retired hospice physician, author, and educator. I also host the podcast End of Life University, where I do interviews with people who work in all sorts of aspects around end of life care, after death care, with grief and bereavement. So a very eclectic podcast with lots of really helpful and interesting interviews with people. So you might like to check that podcast out if you're not already a listener. In this podcast, What Really Matters, I speak to you from my own heart, just myself, solo episodes, and talk about some of the things that I'm learning or working on myself spiritually, since that's a lot of what life is about, that we're each doing our own work, trying to grow, trying to learn new things. So I share some of the things I'm learning, things I might have experienced, issues that have come up for me, new things I've learned, or something I've seen or read, or a practice that's been helpful to me. I'm basically just kind of giving you field notes from my own spiritual journey in hopes that it might be helpful to you for your journey and whatever is happening in your life. So today I have a topic I'm really excited to share with you, because I'm sharing with you a metaphor that has been very helpful to me. And it helps us understand why people see the world so differently. Because if I'm hearing one thing now consistently when I'm on social media, when I'm out in public talking to other people, it is that many of us feel baffled by other people in our lives see the world so differently than we do. Or we're asking, how could they look at something that is happening here and interpret it so differently than I do? And how come I am motivated to want to act and do something, and that person thinks what they're looking at is perfectly fine? And I would say this type of polarity in our vision is 1,000 times larger than it's ever been at any other time in my life before. And it can be confusing and disorienting when we're walking around and talking to people, and it honestly seems as if we are living in two different worlds. And the metaphor I'm going to share with you actually helps us see why, in some ways, we're not living in different worlds, but we have completely different views of the world around us. And so this is a metaphor for the levels of consciousness that I learned a number of years ago from Carolyn Mace. And I found it so helpful. I think of it all the time, and it often really helps me understand in a very simple way what is happening here. And so if you understand that your consciousness is your connection to something higher than us, and your awareness of that, your awareness of your own inner life, your ability to witness your life, your awareness of something greater than your life that you are able to connect to. And consciousness is something that can grow throughout our lifetimes with our experiences. Consciousness might be something many of us kind of stay stuck at one level of consciousness for most of our lives. If you're listening to this podcast, I assume that you have experienced advancing levels of consciousness yourself, because that's what causes you to be a seeker, to want to learn new things, to want to ponder with someone like, oh, what is this spiritual journey about? Because that is kind of the call to consciousness, in a way, is this desire to know more and learn more and figure out, how do I become a better person? How do I become more aware of myself in the world and who I am and what motivates me to behave? How do I become more aware of what else is happening around me, the bigger picture of things? So this metaphor can help you understand where you are on your own journey of consciousness and where you've been, and can also help you understand other people that you know, and to perhaps feel more compassion and more tolerance when we have different views than the people around us. So the metaphor itself has us imagine that we live in a high-rise apartment building in the middle of a crowded city. And if you've been to a big city, you're aware of those very, very tall buildings that often have penthouse apartments on the top, but a number of different floors rising up from ground floor. And this is a big, crowded city, perhaps New York City, where when you're in the heart of downtown, you're surrounded by high-rise buildings across the street all around you. There are many of those buildings. But you imagine that you're living inside that building. And the thing to be aware of is that your perspective on things, on the city itself and the world around you, depends on which floor of the building you live on. So think of it this way. If you live on the first floor, when you look out of the windows of your apartment on first floor, you see trash bins on the sidewalk. You see crowded traffic, honking cars. You hear sirens going by. You see crowds of people walking down the street, sometimes angry or unfriendly. You see arguments taking place. You hear a lot of noise, and you see a lot of congestion and confusion. And you may not, from your window, most likely, you don't see the sky. You don't see the tops of other buildings. You don't see anything that's above you. You're primarily able to look out at that ground floor level and see what is right in front of you. That is the view that you have of the city where you're living. It can feel chaotic and threatening and urgent if you're on the ground floor. But if you move upward, up several floors, say by the time you get to the 10th floor, if you look out a window from an apartment on the 10th floor, if you're living up there, actually there's a lot less noise. You're not seeing the chaos. You're not able to see the traffic and the cars. You don't see people walking by. Some light may be getting in because you might be actually up a little bit higher than some of the other buildings around you. So more light is coming in through your windows. And it feels just a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more ease. And your perception of the city that you live in is quite different than the person living on the ground floor, simply because of what you see every time you look out the window. And then let's imagine we're just going to go all the way to the top. What if you lived in the penthouse apartment at the very top of your building, and this is one of the taller buildings in the city? When you look out the window from the penthouse, you can see the sky above you. You can watch the sunrise. You can see clouds floating by. You don't hear any of the noise of the city where you are. You might see a mountain in the distant horizon. You might look down and see that there's a beautiful park a few blocks away. You might see a river that's winding its way through the city that when you were on the ground floor, you didn't even know was there. From the ground floor, you didn't know there were mountains in the vicinity. You didn't know about the river. You couldn't see the sky. And so remember that you're in the same building. It's all the same building and the same city. You're just seeing it from different floors of the building. So the view of the city is different on each floor. It looks like a completely different world. But like I said, the same city, the same building. It just, what you can see is so very different. And an important point here is if you have made it up to the penthouse in order to take in that view, you had to travel from the ground floor. You've been on the ground floor. You know what the view looks like from those windows. You've been on the 10th floor. You know what that view looks like. You've seen all the other floors. So when you take in the penthouse view, you're aware of what the city looks like from all the rest of the floors that you've already traveled through. But for someone who's only been on the ground floor, They have no awareness of what the penthouse view looks like. They can't even imagine that. They have no idea what else is there. They just can't see it. So when they talk about the city they live in and the things they dislike about it, it may sound completely different to your take because you're thinking about the city from the penthouse view. Like, whoa, it's beautiful. We have this amazing park and there are mountains nearby and there's a river and the sky from up here and the stars. It's incredible. And a person on the ground floor might be talking about the city as it's so grimy and dirty and so noisy and there's trash everywhere and people are angry and people hate each other. It could feel to you as if, whoa, there's no way that we live in the same city. There is no way. That is not my experience at all of where we live. But you can understand it now. The two of you are just seeing things from a different floor, a different level. And so it's important to note that people who live on the ground floor are not wrong. They're not inferior. They are just at the place where all of us begin, and they haven't had an opportunity to go up to any higher floors for one reason or another. They're at the place where all of us started on the ground floor. And so there's no judgment for people who are living on that floor. They are where they are in their journey. And maybe that's where they will stay. Maybe they will always be dwellers on the ground floor. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine. We don't need to judge people for the floor they live on. That's not what it's about. It's more to help us have compassion and realize the view from that floor is more limited, and that will affect how they see things and what the world looks like to them. And it also reminds us, if we spend all our time talking to people who live on the lower floors of our building and trying to explain to them, but it's so beautiful up here. It's so great. Look at this. Look at that. Look what I can see. It's amazing if you go to the top floor. They may not believe us. They may think we're crazy. They may think we're just imagining this. They might not be able to conceive at all of what we're able to see. And it may cause us to want to judge them as being resistant or negative because they're not listening to us. But in fact, as I said before, they've never seen it before. It's very hard to imagine something that you've never seen if you haven't been to the penthouse. And here's another thing to remember, that almost none of us live full time in the penthouse. The penthouse might be a floor we visit sometimes, but almost none of us are able to live there full time. And in a way, we don't really want to. We don't want to be floating up in the clouds all the time. We want to be experiencing the realities of life. We want to be able to go up and down and visit all of the floors at various times in our lives, not stay up in the penthouse. And again, there's nothing morally superior about having seen the penthouse, and there isn't necessarily a floor that is better than another floor. It's simply where you happen to be in terms of your own journey and your own consciousness. So remember that we don't abandon the ground floor. We go back to the ground floor regularly, but we have simply learned how to climb the stairs and how to get from one floor to another floor and what that takes. And we have had to do some work on ourselves or experience certain difficulties that have helped us do that. And so I want to talk a little bit about some practices that could help us move up a floor, because this is really the key. Once you realize, oh, I'm living in this building of consciousness and here I am, I'm at this level, but there are levels, there are higher levels, there are higher views than what I can see right now. And if I do my own work and follow my practices, I might be able to find that staircase that will help me every now and then rise up a level and see a little bit different view, see more than I can see right now. And the goal of this kind of teaching, in my mind, for all of us to remember, it's about doing our own work. It's not about telling people why they're wrong or inferior, because they're at a different level. It's simply for each of us, it's our own responsibility. We hold ourselves accountable. Like, I want to do my work. I want to work on the things I need to work on. And it doesn't matter what someone else is doing, if they're working on themselves or not. That's really not my business. And I really don't need to be judging other people or directing them about how they should be behaving or what they should be doing, even though it probably sounds like I'm doing that right now in this podcast, doesn't it? But I'm not. I'm honestly not trying to tell you how to do the work to do. I'm simply trying to make you aware of this metaphor in case you find it helpful, in case it triggers some thinking in your own mind, like, oh, interesting. Like I'm on a certain level and I know someone else, and we always argue, but it's because we're looking at things, but we're seeing it completely differently because we're looking at it from different levels. So let's talk about just some of the practices that can help us perhaps find the stairs and perhaps move up a floor. And so these are some of the practical things that we can do day to day. And the first is work on awareness. And so it's helpful to stop and just look at your own triggers, your own thoughts and feelings during the day. Like, what's going on with you? What sets you off? What triggers you? And look for what floor you might possibly be on right now. And remember, the emotions that we feel on the ground floor are often focused around fear, anger or outrage, on urgency, being in a hurry, doing more, got to get things done, and also on blaming other people. So if we look back at our day and think, ooh, I spent a lot of time being angry today, and I had a lot of judgment for other people, we can think, oh, those were my ground floor reactions. That was coming from the ground floor, and most likely coming from a part that needs a little bit of work, maybe from a shadow part or a wounded part that we need to heal a little bit if we spend a lot of time in those emotions. When we see things differently, we might say at a higher level, find ourselves feeling curious about why things are happening the way they are. We might feel more compassion. We might feel patience and tolerance more, and a new perspective. We might literally see things differently than we did the day before. And this is when we're looking from a somewhat higher level of our own consciousness. So it's helpful to be aware of how do things change from day to day. Because, some days you're on it, you're in the flow, you're feeling good, you're your best self. You come from your heart of compassion, and you're able to slow down a little, and you're able to smile at people and take things more easily, with more ease. Those are the days when you're probably up a few levels on a slightly higher floor that you've been able to get to. And so be able to evaluate that, like, where am I? Where was I today? Most of the time we go up and down all the time. So we have moments when we're operating from a little higher floor, and moments when we're down on the ground floor with all of our fear and anger and our blaming emotions. So the first step for any practice is this idea of becoming aware of ourselves, our own triggers, our thoughts, our emotions, how we react to things, and what changes from day to day, and seeing ourselves, imagining ourselves in this building, kind of going up and down the stairs, and really utilizing this concept, this metaphor, to help us understand how we are viewing the world and why some days are worse than others, and see if you can see yourself going up and down the stairs to different levels throughout the day. So when you have that awareness, it really helps you begin to learn what pulls you down and what helps you rise up. A second practice, this is of course one of the things I talk about all the time, and one of my favorite practices to recommend, is simply mortality awareness. To become aware of the fact that you are mortal and you will die one day. And it's as if when we start contemplating death and dying, it's almost like an elevator that can lift us up a little faster up some of these levels. It takes us to a different place, because when we see life as finite and we know that it will come to an end, it shifts our perspective faster than most other things we could practice. So if you're part of my end of life university community, you probably already have this death awareness and think about it a lot and contemplate the fact, wow, life is short. I won't be here very long. That framework of mortality awareness really helps you jettison some of the things that keep pulling you down to the ground floor level, because you start to realize, oh, those things don't matter as much to me. You start looking for the really important things in life. And those things that ultimately tend to be more important to you, you find on some of the higher floors. And so it helps you break free from the ground floor level to think about your mortality. And it's one of the practices that can help you gradually start to walk up the stairs a little bit and see life differently. When you see it through this lens that tells you, this won't last. I won't be here for very long. I've got to appreciate the beauty that's here and stop getting stuck in complaining about what's wrong down on the ground floor. So mortality awareness, there are lots of practices. You can journal about it. You can do death meditations. Simply just start to think about and imagine like that life is finite and it's not going to go on forever, and allow yourself to think that every day and contemplate that in your day-to-day life. Number 3, the third practice that can help you quite a lot is spending some time in silence or stillness every day, even just 5 minutes of quiet time, because that allows you to look inside and to listen to your own higher self and connect with your higher self. Most of us are so busy throughout our days. There's constantly something to do, someone to talk to, scrolling on the internet, doing our jobs, buying groceries, paying bills, all the day-to-day things that we do. Our time is full. We have very little time to actually sit down and be contemplative. And so you have to build silence or stillness into your day. It doesn't come to us very naturally to just step out of that busy world and pause for a moment. And so that actually is what happens sometimes when you're on a higher floor. You're able to get into silence because you're not as preoccupied with all the noise that happens on the ground floor. But you may need to consciously create time that you set aside, and you sit down, light a little candle, sit down, close your eyes, and just try to be still. And you'll be amazed sometimes at what arises within you. And it's very hard. 5 minutes can seem like such a long time in the beginning. It feels very hard to sit still and do nothing. But that is how you gradually teach yourself to just be still and be present in the world, is by setting aside time and just doing it. So you start with 5 minutes a day, which can help you begin right away to see life a little bit differently. It's very powerful. And you may want to expand the time eventually, because you may find you enjoy the practice and you want to do it for 15 minutes or 20 minutes a day. That will come naturally once you train yourself to just get into that state of stillness. A fourth idea to help yourself move up the staircase a little bit is the idea of service. And it's amazing how helping someone else actually can lift us up fairly quickly. It can get us out of a really negative space down on the ground floor where we're feeling angry or frustration or we're discouraged with life and the way it is, when we reach out to help someone else, we're like almost automatically transported up the staircase. And it lifts us out of that negative, dark time of how we're seeing things and lets us see a little bit more light. And the idea of acting from compassion, it just brings light into your life. Again, it may not come naturally to some of us, so you might have to intentionally decide, today I'm going to do something kind for someone. And here's something I've started doing, because I go for walks every day in the morning. I started calling them kindness walks. And so, because I'm already doing the walk for exercise, so now I'm making it a kindness walk where every day I focus on, who could I smile at or wave at today? Who could I say hello to? Who might I just connect with and say, I love your dog. Oh, what a great shirt you're wearing, or whatever. Who could I just share one tiny moment of kindness with myself? And the other half of it on the walk is I start observing other people being kind to others. And what blew me away is how much more kindness there is out there than I've ever noticed before. Once I started paying attention, I started seeing people all around me doing the tiniest little kindest things for one another on my walks. And it kind of changed everything. And so I'm still getting the same exercise, but now I'm also in this space where I'm using kindness toward other people. I'm witnessing the kindness around me, and it completely alters the landscape I'm looking at for the day and how I start my day. Once you get your day off with a view from a few floors up, it can change everything. It helps you get in the flow. It changes your energy level. It changes how productive you are, because it gets you out of the constant spiraling down in negativity on the ground floor. So for me, that's been a great practice that I'm loving, the kindness walk. Simple, especially if you're going for walks anyway. Just add kindness to the walk you're already doing. And it's one way, a tiny way of being of service to other people. And it makes big changes to do this very small thing. So the next thing that I want you to remember that can also be small is to add more beauty to your life. And this could be beauty that comes from nature, from art or music, poetry, moments of beauty. And if you're looking for beauty in nature, this could happen on your walk too. Is that you just look around you and notice a tree, some grass, a flower, a cloud going by, the beach, the ocean, a river or stream, anything that you see in nature around you, and you begin to notice beauty. So it could be a kindness and beauty walk if you're walking out in nature, but you can intentionally add other types of beauty, like I was saying. Appreciate art around you when you go in a building or someone else's home, and notice the artwork on their walls, and notice music around you, or intentionally listen to the music that you love, which will bring the beauty of music into your life as well. Beauty alone, experiencing that kind of beauty, naturally pulls you upward, and it can lift you out of the ground floor once again up to a higher level. And if you start to make a tiny little practice every day of saying, what's beautiful today, and just look around, you will find the beauty, like kindness, is everywhere. And so again, it's the simplest little thing that you could do. All we're doing is shifting perception a little bit. And remember, it's easier to see beauty from a higher floor. There's more light there. It's easier to see the beauty. So it serves itself. If you intentionally look for beauty to help you go up a few floors, once you're at that floor, it's easier now to notice beauty, and it's easier to practice kindness from that floor. So you start seeing how these little practices pay off, because they help lift you up initially and they help you stay at a higher level by doing them. And you start to ingrain this in your life and embody these practices in how you live. So these are just simple things. Is, first of all, cultivate your awareness of yourself. Watch yourself going up and down and get a feel for what brings you down, what lifts you up. Mortality awareness, spending time in silence or stillness, being of service to others, and beauty. And so we remember that even people who live up near the penthouse still have to visit the ground floor. They still live a regular life in the normal world. And so our goal is not to escape from normal life, but it's to have the facility and the flexibility to go up and down the stairs. And sometimes we have to build the staircase. So sometimes there isn't an easy staircase there for us. It's our work becomes learning how to go up and down the stairs. And there are some experiences that function like an elevator. And I mentioned this around mortality and awareness, but some of the life experiences we can have may accelerate elevating us up to a different floor. And that can be falling in love, having a spiritual awakening. It could be a moment of awe in nature when you look up and see a canopy of trees overhead, or you see a mountain range, or you look down and see the lights of a city below. It could be holding a newborn child in your arms. It could be any of these beautiful experiences. They're like elevators that can help you almost instantly get to a higher place. And at the same time, sometimes we find elevators in our losses and in our grief that not immediately, but as we have worked to live with loss and carry loss in our lives and carry grief with us, we may find that it has opened up a staircase that gives us more options. In the moment, acutely, grief might pull us down. It can be one thing that actually can take us back down to the ground level for a while. And we may have work to do to help us get out of that spot. But again, these elevators that can take us up quickly, they're unpredictable and we can't make them arrive. What happens is something happens in your life and a door opens and there's an elevator and that you can find yourself on going up a few floors unexpectedly. So we can't count on elevators. We have to rely on the stairs, which are the daily practices that we do. And that's where we know the time we put in will help us step up one step at a time and gradually be able to see things from a different perspective. And so as I close this out, just remember the building. Remember the floors of the building. And if you find yourself disagreeing with someone, you might ask yourself, what floor might they be seeing this from? And what floor am I reacting from? And if it seems obvious, like we're looking out of completely different floors, so we are seeing things differently. There's no blame. No one's right or wrong. We have different views that we're looking at from the floor that we're on, and that's okay. We avoid judgment because, again, we might believe our floor is higher than another person's. Maybe it's not actually. We could be closer to the ground floor than we think we are. And the idea is it's not to judge or grade levels as if one is better than another. It's simply to understand why the view is different and to have compassion for that, and to also learn to know which floor the conversation is happening on. So we don't need to be on the highest floor speaking down to other people. But we just need to understand what floor we are on. And we also need to understand, hey, maybe I could go down to the floor that person is on and try to take their perspective and try to see the world through their eyes and understand what they're seeing, because maybe I could converse with them better about things if I could see it through their eyes instead of asking them to try to understand what I see. That's what true compassion and wisdom are about. So I'm hopeful that this little metaphor of the building of consciousness will be helpful to you. Once again, it doesn't matter which floor you're on. We all go up and down all the time. It's simply in the moment to see, am I on a different floor than the person I'm talking to? And is that where the problem is arising? We're looking out of the same building at the same city, but we're seeing it from different floors. And that's why there's a problem. And so as a closing thought, remember, every human being is living somewhere in this building of consciousness. Sometimes we're on the first floor, overwhelmed by noise and chaos. Sometimes we glimpse the skyline from a higher window. And this journey of the soul is not about escaping from the building or getting out of the city. It's just about learning how to climb the stairs one floor at a time until we're able to glimpse the sky. That's simply what it's all about. So I hope you find this metaphor helpful for you. And I wanted to let you know I am preparing a little PowerPoint presentation that incorporates the 7 lessons into this metaphor, the 7 lessons that I've written about in all my writing. And a lot of these lessons come from the book, The Journey from Ego to Soul, where we're talking about how do we, the obvious thing is on the ground floor, ego is in charge, ego predominates. And moving up floors requires us to learn about our ego and to kind of manage and educate our ego and introduce our ego to our higher awareness, our higher selves. That's what that journey is really about. And that's the journey that can help us climb up the stairs. And I'll be talking about that in a PowerPoint that I'm going to do record for you, and it will be posted on YouTube, and I'll leave a link if you want to go spend a little bit more time on this metaphor and learn about the 7 lessons there. So thanks for joining me here today for this conversation. Hey, I'll see you on the staircase of our building as we go up and down. Remember the kindness walk and find some beauty every day. Bye-bye.